I look at another matchup where the Cowboys have a distinct advantage, and it is this notion that the Packers defense is really, really bad against slot receivers. Now, if I may go a little church lady on you guys, who with the Cowboys offense loves to line up in the slot? Who's this great slot receiver that the Cowboys like to throw the ball to? Could it be CD? Maybe he's the guy who goes nuts here in this one, Joe.
So what are you doing? Betting over 98.5? I mean, that's what you got to do.
Got to. No
I don't have a problem with
me.
it. I don't have an issue with it.
Let's go ladder it, baby.
So yeah, I mentioned it when we did our power rankings, just the matchup. Green Bay gives up a lot of rushing yards. They can't stop the run. 29th most rushing yards allowed per game. They rank 27th in overall defense by DVOA. So I do think Tony Pollard is going to have a game. Now, his rushing yards prop 60.5. It's high. He's only gone over that like 7 or 8 times this year, which is kind of scary. But I do think this will be a higher scoring game, and I like the matchup. So I'm going to bet over Tony Pollard on his rushing yards here, Ed.
I think the way the Dolphins stay in this game is with the screen passes, and they do a lot of it. And you look at the Chiefs defense, there are a lot of reasons why we have waxed poetic about all the great young defenders and DBs and all that stuff. And certainly they're solid. But I do wonder if Miami throwing screen passes, that may be the approach as to how they keep this game close. And this matters a great deal because you look at Tyreek Hill at 82.5 receiving yards. Your first instinct might be, oh, wow, the weather is terrible. How could he possibly get to that mark? Well, he gets to that mark with screen passes, like just little deeks and dunks, 3-5 yards, but then yards after catch. That's how they do it. The Chiefs rank 31st in EPA per play against screens, and I do wonder if we're focusing way too much on the weather and not enough on what the Dolphins are able to do to the point where Hill can reach this number, and maybe there's a good argument to be made for him going over.
So much has been made about Tua and the weather, that side of it, but I think you're right. Okay, so with the weather, it all correlates, right? Whether we're talking about the short passing game or the run game. Some teams use the short passing game as their run game. It's talked about because that's the weakness of Kansas City's defense. That's it. And it also happens to be a strength on the Miami side. That's why I think we're just going a little bit too far with the weather stuff and Tua and and all that, and maybe the injuries on defense a little bit. The cluster injury situation is worrisome, but I do have some trust in Vic Fangio. He knows he's going to have to change how he approaches this game. But I think you're right. That is another way for Miami to take advantage. Another reason I believe they hang around.
I was so ready, and to be fair, I am still so ready to back the Rams. I just think they're the better team overall, whether it's better defensive players, better wide receivers, better coaching, even though Dan Campbell, I understand, is still the coach of the year candidate, better quarterback as well. It's all the Rams to me. One, it's worrisome because, as you said, they're getting mushed. Now they're a public team. That's always scares me a little bit. But not only that, when I ran my numbers, the Lions came out so much better than I thought too in this spot. And again, it makes sense because it's not only indoors where Jared Goff has been incredible this year, 23 touchdowns compared to only 5 outdoors, insane splits. But also, as we talked about with the Rams, they are a team that doesn't pressure the opposing quarterback. And if they're not getting pressure, as they pretty much haven't done the last month, 2 months, then Jared Goff is going to have his way. I also think it's a sneaky spot for the running backs, though, because the Rams have also really struggled against the run of late. And so that's how the Lions can also dominate this game. So I like the 3.5. That's where I got it. It's 3 now. I understand. I have grown enough with concern that I'm still taking the 3, but whereas I was really probably cocky in the Rams money line, I don't want to get there. I think it's going to be much closer than even I initially expected before running my numbers on Monday.
Rams, Texans, money line, parlay. Sounds like fun to me.
The one I'm staying away from, Aaron, actually, is the Packers. And it may just be like the haunted soul of growing up in Dallas media, since that's where I came from, and having seen this over and over again. And like, even if you look at the Packers schedule, and whether it's the quarterbacks they've faced, even these past 2 weeks, I had a lot of confidence in Justin Fields and the over, a game that reached a 26-point environment like a donkey. But historically, Joe Barry, like in their 6 matchups, has defended Justin Fields really well. So it makes sense that that defense showed up to that game last week. But even if you just go down the road between, injured Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young, Jaron Hall, who got benched, then Justin Fields, like the Packers just really haven't played anyone in a couple months, honestly. And so if they got drowned by the Cowboys, would make total sense. But then you have to say, well, like, oh yeah, Mike McCarthy has never coached or lost a close game. Oh yeah, the Cowboys have never screwed this up in this spot before. So I think really it's the ghost that haunt me with the 7.5 more than anything. Like I said, though, if the Cowboys were to just dunk on the Packers, would not be shocking, but I'm still very much worried about that number.
So much Cleveland money flooding the market early on, and then now we're ticking back the other way. Now people are saying, you know what, there's a little bit of value on Houston. The side is not where I'm going. It is a lot of fascinating angles as far as that goes. I mean, we just saw this game, but it didn't have Stroud. And then the numbers not that far off from where we were, because that closed Cleveland -3.5 without Stroud. The Browns defense, do you think that's going to be an issue because they're on the road, as crazy as that sounds, and they're far and away the best defense in the NFL? But, those road splits not looking great. But lately, this Texans run defense has been really strong. But how much are they going to run? Because with Flacco, they've been slinging it. I think it's really interesting. One thing that I keep going back to is the Texans haven't played prolific offenses. Like, there are only a couple of spots where you're like, okay, they faced a top 10 quarterback this year. Week 1 was against Lamar, middle of the season before the injury against Burrow. And we know it's not the same Burrow. And honestly, one of the better quarterbacks they faced was Flacco a few weeks ago. And they end up giving up 36 points in that game. I see scoring. We're not worried about the weather in this spot. We're looking at 2 offenses that are going to push it down the field at 44.5. Fine. I agree with the move through the 44. I'm going over. If you look at the schedule rank DVOA, the strength of the competition, they're even. 23 for the Eagles, Bucks 24. So it's not like the Eagles faced a much tougher schedule. They ended up getting the Giants a couple of times in that division. They got the Commanders a couple of times too. So they had their easy game. So the schedule was about the same, and the Bucks had a better point differential. Like the Eagles, yes, 11-6 plus 5. They should have been like a 500 team this year. 9-8, 8-9. Probably should have had the same record that the Bucks had. So maybe it's the get right spot that nobody's really prepared for. But I think a lot of this number is based on reputation. Like, if you're just looking at this year, should it be 3 on the road?